Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my name is Diptii Shah and welcome to my channel. Today I have with me, or rather I am blessed to have with me, Miss Sudevi Sundari, who is one of the earliest yoga teachers in Hong Kong. Hello Sundari, namaste and welcome to my show.
Namaste, Dipti. Thank you so much for having me on your show today. It's an honor.
It's my pleasure to have you, really. So Sudevi, you are a yogin for forever. So tell me, how did yoga enter your life?
So first of all, I wouldn't say forever, but it definitely has been a few decades, and it was definitely a calling of mine from a very young age. I think I was kind of dissatisfied with the choices that one should make. Get married, have kids, have a mortgage, have, that sort of, it didn't inspire me. So from a young age, I was kind of always like a seeker, and I still consider myself, very much a student. Even though I'm a teacher, I'm constantly learning. My yoga journey started in 1992 when I moved from the UK to Hong Kong. And I think the first thing that really hit me was that, Hong Kong is a very multi-diverse city. There's so much available to you. You can, materially, you can achieve a lot in Hong Kong. And so I went down that path for a year or so, and I accumulated, money, friends, beauty, wealth, all those things that we that gratifies us externally. And there was an internal part of me that was like, oh, something really big is missing. And that kind of grew. The more material abundance that I got, external abundance, the more dissatisfied I was. It was like, oh, what's there's something more that I need to. I was seeking some kind of. I think I would describe it as a connection to the soul. Yeah.
Right.
So like, yeah, it's like my body and my emotions and my mind were all sort of okay, but my soul was sort of like, remember. It was like a little whisper in those quiet times that I could hear, remember why you're here. I think the more that we listen to our internal dialogue, the more we go on our path. But in order to listen to the internal dialogue, we have to practice something, some kind of stillness or meditation. So yeah, my journey started in 1992, and I don't know how much more you want me to expand on that, but basically it was an amazing journey. I'm originally Indian, but I'd never been to India.
Right.
So, because I was brought up in the West, and there was a part of me that always wanted to fit in the West, because there was quite a bit of racism, and so you adjust. And then when I went to India, it was like, oh my God, I'm Indian.
Right.
And I had this identity sort of belonging, this roots, sort of came back that I think before I didn't have. And I met my yoga teacher, and I started to study Hatha yoga. Right. But it was like they say that you take off where you left off in your last life.
Sure.
So I know I had done some tapasya, some practice in my last life, because when I met my yoga teacher, it was like, I know this. I already know this.
Right.
It wasn't like I was learning from scratch.
So Devi, after so many years of practice and learning theory as well as doing the practice, How would you define yoga? What is yoga for you?
So in the beginning, yoga, actually in the beginning, I really learned yoga means, like, the literal word yoga means to connect,
Right.
to unite, to link. What are we linking to? Ultimately, we're linking to Atma, and that translated from Sanskrit means your soul, because that's the part in you that is eternal. So yoga means to connect, to link to your Atma, to your soul's purpose, and your connection with what? With something bigger than you. Call it what you want. Consciousness, love, Buddha, Allah, God, whatever name, it's the same thing, but connecting with something bigger, with source. So my teachers very much taught me yoga from that perspective, not from the perspective of how far can you go in your back bend? Can you wear Lululemon? No offense with Lululemon. I like some of their stuff, but it's the Western culture has made yoga just the asanas, just the postures. So I learned yoga traditionally. So I got a very good understanding of the whole package. It's the way you breathe. Yoga means the way you live. It's not just a job, it's a lifestyle. The way you eat, the way you think. What is your morning practice? Do you have a practice? So sometimes yoga means to dance because it's a meditative movement practice. Sometimes yoga means to do pranayama and start controlling my breath. Sometimes it means to sit in stillness. Sometimes it means to get on the mat and do some asana mindfully. So, yoga ultimately connects, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. When all four bodies are in good relationship with each other, that means your physical body, your mental body, your emotional, and your spiritual, a harmonizing integration of our whole being takes place. So I would say, yeah, it's quite a lot. It's quite a big topic. Like, what does yoga mean to me?
So Sudevi, when I accept yoga into my life, what are the changes that takes place? Can yoga change my life really?
Well, it definitely changed my life. It changed the very fabric of my being. It changed the way I perceived myself. It changed the way I perceived the world around me, my relationship. So yeah, it definitely can change your consciousness, because ultimately you're changing your consciousness. Even if you come to yoga, like I have some students that come to yoga and they've done years and years of mat practice. Asana means like postures, like mat practice. And they're like, I want to know more. So even when you start just by doing perhaps a few poses, a few asanas, then there's a sense of when your body and your breath are in sync, there's a unity, and yoga means unity. So when your body and your breath are in sync, then there's this kind of wholeness that you feel. So even if you start just by doing a few asanas, it can have an effect definitely on your daily life. It definitely changed in the way, also especially in the way I reacted to life, to challenges, because there's also a philosophy behind yoga, karma, like nothing happens, you're exactly where you're meant to be right now. Like there's a certain acceptance, a way in which you embody the philosophy of yoga. So it definitely changed my life on so many levels.
So Devi, as a teacher, which all modalities did you learn and what do you teach? Like,
I started my journey learning Hatha yoga, but I really learned the 8 limbs of yoga. So there's a yoga ladder where you start from your relationship with others, your relationship to yourself, then comes the asana, then comes the pranayama, controlling your breath. And then after you control your breath, you learn how to draw your senses in like a little tortoise that draws its limbs within its shell. You start to look inside. And then after pratyahara, you start to move into concentration. You can't get anything in life if you don't concentrate, right? You have to have concentration. Then after concentration, you go into meditation, and then you go into the super state of consciousness known as samadhi. So when I did my training, I really learned these 8 limbs of Hatha. And I was very much fully surrendered to the practice of Hatha. It really inspired me on many levels. But then I started to meet other teachers, and I decided to learn Kundalini. And I also became very curious about bhakti yoga. So bhakti yoga is like bhakti actually translated means devotion or service, like living in service. So in the beginning, I was like, we are always serving, whether you're serving your husband or your boss or your children or even your body, like I need to eat. Let me just give it some service and make some nourishing food. So Bhakti is about service. And I would say now, with all the different types of yoga that I've learned, my trainings and my sharings to the planet is predominantly Hatha and Bhakti. Hatha gives me the strong, healthy body, and Bhakti gives me the really expansive heart space where I can just start to give and receive, like receive more love and give more love, because you can't really give unless you receive.
Right.
So it's really about stretching open the heart and, operating from a more unconditional place where you're not so much attached to the results.
Right.
You understand? If you do something where you're like, I want this result, there's still a sense of tit for tat. I'll do this and I'll get this back. Whereas Bhakti is more about unconditional love, just offering it and not being attached to a particular result, but just doing the act of pure loving.
Pure loving, pure giving.
Yeah.
So Devi, you told me about there is something called as a spiritual bank balance. And we as human beings have the brains and the time and the opportunity to increase the spiritual bank balance in this lifetime. Would you give us some tips about this?
A really nice analogy is, it's a simple analogy, but it works. It's like if you have a little bird in a cage and the bird is chirping away, feed me, but the owner of the bird is just too preoccupied with polishing the cage because it's a golden cage. So we take so much care of the cage, like she's polishing it and she's spraying it and she's dusting it so it's all nice and shiny, and but the bird inside is like, oh, feed me, I need some attention. So in the same way, we can see this analogy that we spend so much time on the body. The cage represents the body. Now it's like, as soon as there's some aging, we do the Botox, we do, we're so occupied with this shell, with the cage, and inside there's a soul. And the soul, the bird represents the soul, is eternal. That means it will go with you. That's the essence, that's the part of you that will move into your next body, if you believe in reincarnation, which I do. I never did, but I've had so much proof and so much evidence and through experience that it actually exists. So I think there was a time that, when I came to Bhakti Yoga, it was like, wow, I've really ignored that soul, the soul inside. I've been so preoccupied with the body and fulfilling my desires and ticking off things on my things to do list, that I have completely forgotten to listen to the inner voice, or you could say the higher self, the soul, and to have a relationship with it. So if you're having a relationship with things that are temporary, this body is where we are in this body, but in my next life, I don't know which, I'll take a new body. So there's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, when we wear our clothes and they get dirty, we discard them and put them in the laundry basket and wash them, and we take a new set of clothes. So in the same way, when we die, when we leave our bodies, when we die, the soul takes a new body.
Right.
So if you haven't done any practice on your spiritual essence of who you are, the eternal self, then you pretty much move on with a very low spiritual bank balance. But if you just spent so much time on the externals of life that are temporary, because this body is going to be either cremated or put in a box under the ground. Right. So, and it's a temporary home for us, you know, then your result is going to be temporary. So basically, if you serve and you spend energy on the eternal part of yourself, it's going to carry on. It's eternal. The result is eternal. But if you spend time on your temporary self, then the result is also temporary. It doesn't mean that I don't take care of my body. I do my asana practice every day. I'm a vegetarian. I eat beautiful, nourishing foods. But I don't overly, I know that there's something deeper and eternal. So how we can do that is by having a regular spiritual practice, even if it's just for 2 minutes a day. You have to, one has to get a higher taste. You can't, you have to, it's just like when you do a yoga class and then you're in Shavasana at the end. And then I tell my students, slowly begin to move your fingers and toes, and nobody moves because they're just like, oh, it feels so good. You know, like they're just totally relaxed and, you know, and so you can have, you once you get a taste of how it feels to acknowledge your soul, it's super blissful. It's full of ananda, which means bliss. It's a beautiful way in which you can deal with life as well, in the sense that there's something that's more eternal. Like, even though I'm growing old and my body's not the same, I'm not depressed about it because I have this soul that's eternal.
Right.
So a regular practice will help you to build that balance, and it could be anything. Some people do it through dance, through movement. Some people do asana on the mat. Some people meditate. Some people just prefer to do pranayama. Another really good one is mantra. I do mantra every morning, mantra meditation. So it's just a repetitive mantra that you keep repeating until the volume in your mind turns down, and you sort of, the mantra kind of acts like windscreen wipers, you know? So it sort of clears away all the clutter in the mind of like, I should do this, and, you know, all that dialogue that constantly goes on. So having a regular practice really helps you to build that spiritual bank balance, which is so important in this day and age with all the challenges that we face. It's super important for us to have a regular spiritual practice where you know that, you know, you could, how would that look? You could make a little corner, place a little mat down there, have a candle burning or a quote of someone that inspires you, sit in silence, observe your breath, that would be a stillness practice. So something which just allows you to go aham brahasmi. So
Sudevi, doing this meditation, getting that bliss feeling sounds very good, but is quite difficult. We have this constant thoughts passing through the mind, and that's why I think this is the primary reason why people give up on the idea of meditation. How do we control this, this movement of the senses that we have?
yeah, it's a very good question, Dipti. It is very difficult, to control the mind. It's in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, the mind is either your best friend or your worst enemy. It's like the wind. How do you control the wind when there's typhoon? So everything begins with senses, your senses. So we interact with the world through our senses. We see, we smell, we taste, we touch, and we hear. These 5 senses is how we interact with the world. So if your senses are not controlled, then it will have a direct relationship on the mind. For example, so how would you control your senses? You would, when you know that you've eaten enough, you would be able to stop and say, I'm full now, right. I need to stop eating. So that's an example. Or, you have already 10 pairs of shoes, and then you walk past the shoe shop and you buy another pair. It's like your senses need to be controlled to a certain degree. So when your senses are controlled, then it has a direct relationship on your mind, because then your mind starts to become more pacified, because there's so much input in this day and age, like there's so much input, advertisements. If you do this, you'll look better. And if you buy this perfume, you'll look like this model, or, there's so much, and we're taking it in. You can't even ride the MTR train now, or even the buses in Hong Kong. They have like TVs now. So you can't even look out the window, because everything is drawn to your senses being stimulated. So when your senses are too stimulated, it makes your mind turbulent. For example, like if you live in the countryside and you're just looking at nature, your senses will be like, oh, it'll be looking at birds or some sort of, look at that butterfly. But if you live on the 21st floor in a concrete building and you see the person in the kitchen next to you cooking, it's there's just so much
going on.
Going on. So that has a direct relationship with the mind. So everything begins with controlling your senses, and then your mind will be pacified. Now, your mind is always giving options. The mind is the thing that always says, you should do this, and maybe you should do that. And it's giving so many options. And above the mind is the intelligence. So the intelligence is the one that chooses and says, I think I want to do that. So it goes senses, mind, intelligence. The intelligence is the one that chooses and says, that's a good choice. But your intelligence is not going to be, you could call it almost your intuition. It's not going to be refined if you haven't started from the bottom, which means your senses have to be controlled. So go senses, mind, intelligence. Intelligence is the one that chooses. And then above the intelligence comes the ego. So ego is not actually a negative thing. Actually, we have a false ego and we have a true ego. The false ego is, I am Indian, I am teacher, I am student. The real ego is I am one with everything. I am a part and a parcel of the supreme consciousness. So when you come from the real ego, and you understand who you are, and you come from that place like, I am Satchit Ananda, or I am, bliss, knowledge, and eternal. If you come from that place, then everything below that becomes in sync. So you've got ego, intelligence, mind, senses. And then above the ego is the soul.
Mm.
So once you understand that I am Satchit Ananda, I am full of bliss, I am eternal, I am, what's in me is in you, and you see that oneness, then you can start to have a relationship with your soul. So this is a kind of like mini little ladder where we can start with the senses. Then that controls the mind. Then the intelligence can make the right choice. The mind is giving 20 options. Intelligence is going, nope, that's the good choice for you. Mm. And then the ego, and then the soul. So when these are all aligned, it's great.
Right.
Because you're always in your center. Problem comes is when we're like, mind is giving so many options, and we're like, oh, I'm so confused, I don't know what to do. And intelligence is so dull because you've done no practice,
right,
in controlling it. Intelligence is so dull that it can't make the right choice.
Right.
That's when the confusion comes in, and people are like, I don't know what to do. But it starts with the senses. So your meditation practice will be super good if you can start to control your senses. And, it just means, like when you're maybe out at a party and you've had 2 glasses of wine, and, you're like, that's enough. But if you keep going, then you wake up in the morning, you're dehydrated, you have a hangover, like this. I mean, it's been such a long time since I felt that. But, I'm just giving these little mundane examples of like, how do we control our senses? How do we know when enough is enough? When you're on the computer late at night and you've got to sleep to be up for an early morning meeting, turn it off. Go to bed. Right. Do some deep breaths, have a cup of chamomile tea and read some Rumi poetry, something that's beautiful, that would, make you dream beautiful things. So everything begins with the senses. Once the senses are controlled, everything will work beautifully.
Right.
And your meditation practice will be so much deeper, and, your space between your thoughts. So you have a thought, and then there's a tiny space, and then you have another thought, and there's a tiny space. So meditation helps to actually stretch out those pauses between your thoughts. You understand? So the more you practice, you get those, well, maybe I should do this now. It's like the pause between the inhale and the exhale. The pauses between thoughts and breath are so interconnected. And your meditation will become much more fruitful.
Doesn't your website mention this as a quote, that this space between the thoughts is actually enlightenment, as per the Gita?
Yes, the space between the thoughts is where you really experience your true self. It's all the clutter that we need to get rid, of. We get so caught up in our lives, I'm not good enough, or we judge our day on how much we've achieved in the day. Like, oh, the last thing at night, I should have done that. Oh, I should, and we think we're doing good, but the real nectar is in the stillness. When you have nothing going on, how content can you be?
Very beautifully put. Very beautifully put. So Sudevi, please tell us about your workshops, about your teacher trainings, about your retreats.
Super. I'd love to. Yeah. So I'm based in Hong Kong at the moment, and I haven't been traveling. So most of my workshops, teacher trainings happen in Hong Kong. Right. I do a few workshops every now and again. So you'll just have to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. Also, my website is there, so maybe you can share the details.
I will.
And my biggest love is the yoga teacher training. I realized that I'm only one teacher, and I think I'm very passionate about yoga being shared in its entirety, not just the asanas, not just the poses. Like, if you want to become a yoga teacher, learn the whole thing and come as a real holistic, teaching yoga as it is, not as it is changed by Western culture, but learning yoga as it is. It's very wholesome. And I can confidently say that now. I think I've trained about like 90 people in Hong Kong, some of which are teaching. Some people do my training to teach, and some people just do it to get inspired to have a regular practice, to have a regular home practice. So it's for all kinds of people. There's no experience needed, because we really do start from grassroots.
Sure.
Like, we start from the bottom and then we work our way up. The trainings happen in Hong Kong. I keep the groups very small, to 10 people maximum.
Right.
My next training is in February,
Right.
just after the Chinese New Year, and it's in the Kowloon side. And it's a group of 10, and we go deep.
Right.
We go deep. We learn chakras, endocrine system, anatomy, meditation, mantra, pranayama, asanas, poses. It's a really safe space for you to let go of who you think you are and sort of have this internal journey. But the beautiful thing about it is it takes place over 4 months.
Right.
So it's once a week, every Saturday from 9 till 6. We spend the whole day. It's kind of like a retreat.
Yes.
Yeah. And it goes on over 4 months, and so that in the week you can just kind of let the knowledge drip from the head into the heart and embody it and practice it. So it's more like a
Natural integration into the system.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like a natural integration into the system where you can live it. You don't have to just keep it in the head, all this knowledge. You actually embody it.
Yes.
And it's working really well. I get great feedback from it, and transformation happens on an internal level. So you still have your family life, but you're just more internally centered and have a stronger practice. So that happens in Hong Kong. Next one's in February. I also teach private classes, one-on-one or in small groups. I don't like teaching more than 10 people, because I like to see everyone and get to know them quite personally, because everybody has their challenges. So I like to be able to see those and point those out. And then I also teach a dance practice once a month.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful practice. It's a conscious dance practice where it's a dance practice where you get to feel what you need to let in and what you need to let out and what you need to let go of, and how do you just really embody this beautiful body through movement. So it's really about finding your own dance. It's like, if you're not going to do your own dance, who's going to do it? It's up to you to do your own dance. So it's a super feminine practice, which involves a lot of trust and intuition and feeling into the body. So I do that once a month too. So between the yoga and the dance, I'm like, oh,
bliss.
It's great.
Awesome, Sudevi. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom. Thank you so
Diptii.
much.
Thank you, my dear. So nice to meet you, and I hope to see you one day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sudevi. Namaste.
Namaste, beautiful.